We are trotting through Hammerland once again with 1969's Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed by our all-time Hammer MVP, Terrence Fisher. And I'm here once again with my faithful writing companion, Aaron Christensen, Dr. AC of Horror 101 with Dr. AC. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, and St. Peter says hi as well.
Has anyone ever, have you ever seen any like fan art of someone doing a Peter Cushing painting, like calling it St. Peter?
As St. Peter? I don't
Yeah,
think I have seen that, to be honest, and that would be amazing.
I might have to, that might
You
bring me out
should
of art
do that.
retirement.
You're an artist. You should do that.
Well, maybe I'll save that for October during scary season.
I would
But
do a stick figure and I would write St. Peter and have an arrow. That would be the extent of my, and that people be like, it's not really the joke we were looking for.
but it's the joke we need. Now, I remember from last month you were unnaturally excited about talking about Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, which is quite amazing considering this is like the 9 millionth Frankenstein movie we've talked about. We're taking these Hammer movies in chronological order. The Frankenstein films just keep getting better and more interesting. You know, some odd sidesteps, notwithstanding. But yeah, to see that this is, I think, your favorite of the Hammer Frankensteins.
This is my favorite of the Hammers. I'm curious to hear how it fell out for you as well. But this was also the first of the Hammer Frankensteins I saw, and I always wonder if it's just sentimental value that this was the first one I saw. But I would make a strong case, as I will over the course of our podcast, why I think this is the best of the Hammer Frankensteins.
Well, yeah, I want to dig into this being your first because one of the things that struck me, I really love this film. It strikes me as the evolution of the character as we've been watching him in these various incarnations. We've kind of talked about this. He's still the same guy, or it's supposed to be the same guy. They fudge with the continuity a bit, but we see him changing over these films. So this is almost like the Omega version of Dr. Frankenstein. So it's surprising to me that you like the other movies as much as you do, because I feel like watching this as a starting point and then kind of regressing back to him being like the simpler proto version would be kind of distracting.
Well, I mean, yes, and I saw this when I was young, and I didn't catch up with the other ones until later. And so, I did revisit them much as you were visiting them, or you're visiting them for the first time in order. But this was kind of like the odd one out. And how I came to see it was a little if I'll wax autobiographical for a moment, was that I was probably like 8 or 9 and in the Bay Area watching Saturday night creature features. And Mom AC was not keen on me staying up late to watch bad movies because she thought horror movies were bad, but she was okay with monster movies. And so, like monster, well, and I think that, there's a fine line between a horror film and a monster movie.
Yeah.
But this was advertised in the TV guide. For those of you who don't know what a TV guide is, please Wikipedia now. But in the TV guide, it was advertised next to a picture of Karloff as the monster. So it was advertised, like they did a double feature, creature feature. And the first one I think was a Karloff Frankenstein, but the second one was this film, which is decidedly not a monster movie nor a Karloff film. And so I stayed up, watched my black and white 1930s or 40s, monster movie, and then I decided I would stick around for the double feature. And it turned out to be this movie. And within the first 5 minutes, when you have, fright masks and beheadings and heads being carried home in buckets and, corpses falling out of like glass cases, I was like, oh dear. And I consider this one of my rites of passage, like, because this felt like one of the first horror films I saw. It was not a monster movie. It was not Godzilla. It was not King Kong. It was not Dracula. It was a terrifying horror film.
Yeah, I can understand watching at a young age being, freaked out by it. like the other Frankenstein movies, I don't find these scary. I just find them endlessly fascinating from just like an intellectual, like kind of what if scenario. Like
Right.
someone going, Frankenstein, I think, is objectively, he's either objectively mad or he's just the world's most ambitious sociopath. And maybe there's not a difference. But before we get any further, I understand you wrote a review of this film,
Right.
and you want to share it with us?
I would. Well, see, I did as someone who's a big fan of this series, for Evil Speak magazine, I wrote a collection of essays on each film, more or less just kind of a capsule review. But I felt like this would be a more articulate way than my normal babbling to do a synopsis. So I figured I'd save us both the struggle, and I would just dive in.
Do it.
Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, 1969. Pitch black and pitch perfect, Cushing's penultimate Hammer Frankenstein picture is by turns shocking, suspenseful, emotionally moving, and genuinely frightening. Driven from yet another town for his blasphemous endeavors, the fiercely iconoclastic scientist ensconces himself within the boarding house of a young couple, played by Simon Ward and Veronica Carlson, whom he proceeds to coerce into assisting with his morally dubious experiments. When Frankenstein discovers that a former colleague and brain transplant expert has been institutionalized, he plots to kidnap and rehabilitate the poor chap on his own. When the associate dies of a heart attack, the determined Baron simply offs another doc at the asylum and swaps out the brains. This, in turn, leads to the film's most intriguing element, for what could be more terrifying than to find oneself literally trapped in another body, unable to convince anyone of your true identity. In this showcase role, esteemed British actor Freddie Jones is nothing short of miraculous, conveying true anguish and desperations in scenes with his disbelieving wife, then shifting to a deadly cold mask of vengeance against the scheming Frankenstein. Cushing's turn here is absolutely his darkest and undeniably capital E evil incarnation of the character. He blatantly commits murders, blackmails, and bullies the young couple, and finally, in one of the studio's most controversial scenes, proceeds to casually rape Carlson for no other reason than to show he can. While a sharp about-face from the previous installment's touches of tenderness, Cushing manages to be more than just a two-dimensional ogre. Through his committed, well-crafted performance, we see the years of single-mindedness and self-convinced superiority have transformed him into an utterly amoral being, one to whom nothing matters but his own desires, however base they might be. The terrific screenplay is by Burt Batt, based on his screen story with Anthony Nelson Keyes, who also produced, and Fisher's direction is top-notch. The scene, featuring a burst water main in the backyard, rivals Hitchcock at his best.
And scene. Well done. I think, that brings us to a close for this episode. Thank you very much. No, he hit on the fine points there. Very, very well done. And it does encapsulate a lot of the stuff that I loved about this movie. And I think one of the places we can start is going back to the idea of, is Frankenstein insane? Because this is the most extreme behavior we've seen out of him, and almost out of character behavior, unless you stop to think. The Brandt character, who's this doctor who's locked up in an asylum, it turns out there's this great little bit of world building where he and Frankenstein had been corresponding for a long time, just writing letters back and forth about, well, I can do this brain transplant. Well, I think I can do this brain transplant. Yep. Kind of like a rivalry, which it doesn't, it just opens the idea that this might have been going on while the other movies were happening. And he just never told anybody because he's just involved in a million other, plots. But this endeavor drew Brent crazy to the point where he's just a vegetable sitting in an insane asylum cell, non-responsive except for bits of howling rage that he has to be sedated for. But we've always seen Frankenstein as cool as a cucumber. So I wonder if the manifestation of his insanity is this erratic behavior that is just coming out because he works so tirelessly to keep it clamped down that it's
Right.
just like, no, it's going to come out. It's going to come out with you losing all sense of self-preservation in that final scene, or you taking this kind of like grandfatherly presence that you have, at least in terms of look and sophistication. He can blend into society, and using that to defile this young woman in her bed. It's just because I honestly thought this was going to be a dream sequence, like it was her fantasy or something. Well, not a fantasy, but like her nightmare. She
Right.
because she's got this guy who's lording this secret over her and her boyfriend. I love the morally ambiguous characters that we haven't quite seen yet before. They're easily blackmailed because even though their intentions are good, they're making money through the illegal drug trade to support her mother.
Right.
But they are neck deep in this stuff, and Frankenstein finds that weakness and he exploits it to the nth degree.
Yep.
So everyone's corrupt, everyone's crazy. The boyfriend looks like a young Axl Rose, and I couldn't stop seeing the video for November Rain every time he was on screen.
I hadn't thought of Simon Ward in that regard, but now, welcome to the jungle. I like it. And yes, I think I love that, as you see it, like there are no characters who are black and white. I mean, you've got our heroes, played by Carlson and Simon Ward. Veronica Carlson, who was we just chatted about in Dracula, not Prince of Darkness, Dracula is Risen from the Grave. And we will see her again in Horror of Frankenstein in just a month or two.
Wow, okay. Playing a different part, I assume.
Playing a different part, yes. But yes, I mean, the fact that they are, peddling cocaine to, support her mother, I think is brilliant. And I like that we have, like even the police inspector played by Thorley Walters, who we also just saw in Frankenstein Created Woman. I love his uptight, self-righteous inspector who's actually also good at his job. Like he is tracking, he's tracking Frankenstein and his route. And it's not through just sheer coincidence. Like he's using solid police work and tracking, he's like, okay, where have the thefts occurred? Let's investigate that. Let's talk. And yes, he does dismiss people's conclusions. Well, clearly this is a doctor. He's like, do you know it's a doctor? Because you don't know that it's a doctor. All we know is that surgical equipment has been stolen. Medical equipment has been stolen. And I'm like, I love how, again, he's a dick, but he's not wrong.
See, I misread that whole thing because I couldn't get past the dickishness. He's got this second in command guy who looks oddly like a young Roddy McDowell, who is constantly like they're together. And I just got the idea that he was the inspector, like the big town puffed up guy, but the one who was kind of running the show was this his wiry second in command. I did like just Mrs. Brandt is a character who shows up. She's the wife of the insane doctor, and once Frankenstein and company smuggle the doctor out of the asylum, they discover that he's missing. They gotta try and find him, and she's all in hysterics. Let's see. She goes to the boarding house and finds out the secret. Frankenstein reveals himself to her, and in a lovely bit of emotional blackmail says, look, you just leave him here with us for a week, and when you come back, your husband's going to be like 100%. First of all, when she goes to the detective later, because of course they skip town, she says, I should have come to you right away. And he said, that was very stupid of you, Miss Brandt.
Yes.
Just the most callous. It was, but I don't want to step over the brilliant bit of comedic editing where Frankenstein is showing Miss Brandt the door and giving these assurances like, come back in a week. It's going to be fine. And then he said, don't worry, Miss Brandt, there's no cause for concern. The door closes. He turns close up on Peter Cushing. He says, back now, we're leaving.
Right. I was like, yes. Oh my. Now let's rewind just a little bit to the scene where Mrs. Brandt is encountering her husband, or, basically she is encountering her husband. He just happens to be residing in a different body now.
Yeah. And which she can't see because he's all bandaged up.
He's bandaged up. And I thought that scene has so much emotional weight. Like you talk about the emotional blackmail, but I mean, like I feel like that was a genuinely evocative scene where
Yes.
she's communicating through the husband gesturing with a hand, saying that he recognizes her, and that he, like when she gives him the wrong hair color, he says no, and then she says auburn, he says yes. And it's like, oh wow, like this is what I love about this film. Not only is it kind of the perfect distillation of the Frankenstein myth. It is, we're taking a brain out of one body, we're putting it in another. We've got Frankenstein who is hell-bent on seeing his achievement through. He doesn't care who gets in the way. But there's also just this amazing amount of emotional depth. Like I feel like the relationship between Carl and I've forgotten Veronica Carlson's name, but the relationship between the two lovers is really nicely done. And I think that the relationship between the Brants, I mean, the scene where Brant in his new body, played by Freddie Jones, those scenes where he's hiding behind, a dressing shade and trying to communicate with her through another man's voice, and it's like, like you can just sense how disturbing that is for him, that he's trying to convey this love that he has for his wife. He really wants to see her, but he knows that he can't show his face to her because it's not the face she fell in love with. And I think
Well,
that, like in the first, sorry, I will let you talk, I promise.
no.
But there are two scenes where I can't remember another Frankenstein film that has genuine suspense. Like the scene where the police enter the house and they are searching for Frankenstein. They're searching for, and they've wallpapered off the door to the cellar, and you see them all searching around, and like you're like, are they gonna find it? And then they don't, and they go away. And then the scene with the burst water main, I just think is amazing because you genuinely don't know how that's going to come out. And Veronica Carlson has been kind of this innocent all along. She's kind of been on the periphery. She hasn't been directly involves her in the crime. She becomes an accessory at that point, and she has to become an accessory by being just drowned with water or sewer water, and dragging a corpse into the bushes and having to stand there while the police and the workmen are all there. And Cushing comes around the corner and she just kind of gestures in this little weak gesture of saying, it's okay, the body's over here, I'm standing guard, and I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much to read into this, but it's like, the dirt and the stench and the sludge of her misdeeds and
Yes.
the things she's involved with is raining down on her and drenching her, and now she can't hide it. And then here comes Dr. Frankenstein, just like, fit as a whistle, like in his dapper hat or whatever, like, oh, what's going on here? And going back to the scene with the police coming into the house, also very telling. It's so goofy because you've got Carl, the way he's kind of playing it off is I'm just standing here painting the steps. I've never seen someone painting stairs before.
Yeah, he's like, I'm doing calligraphy on the stair. But I love that, I mean, clearly he doesn't know what he's doing.
Right.
And like, he's just doing the best he can. I'm a doctor, and so I'm going to paint these stairs. I think that this is just it's my favorite, and it isn't, again, I having revisited, it's not just for sentimental reasons. I think it shows Fisher off at his best. I think Terrence Fisher's direction is extraordinary from beginning to end.
Well, and I also the stair scene, they do cut to Frankenstein downstairs
Right.
because he can hear what's going on, but the look on his face, it's interesting because it undercuts the suspense for him.
Right.
I'm still worried about the other characters being busted, but the look on his face, he's just looking up kind of like, oh, like this is going to work. Like, it's cute. They're probably all scared.
And he does. I mean, and Cushing has that sense of confidence throughout. Like, he absolutely believes he is superior to everybody else in the film. And when he finally kind of meets his match in Dr. Brant, at the, in the final blazing inferno finale. I was like, like you could see him like going, are you, I can't believe this is happening to me. And I'm having to, race around and like dodge fireballs.
Well, and I think that might be the distinction. I don't know because Brandt did not go irrevocably insane. We see because he's still capable of recognizing people and kind of being redeemed.
But he cured him. Cushing cures him with with like the dumbest brain surgery ever, but he basically drills into his head with some really awesome like sound effects. But like I think that was what he was saying, is that he knew how to cure his insanity because then he would be able to get the information.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a hard buy, but that is what they were selling.
Well, and I guess I kind of glossed over that because I'm more a fan of like the thematic idea that, this, if he had just been left alone in that cell to like howl at the moon and, get sedated and whatever, just kind of be far gone,
right,
he probably would have been fine with that. But then he is given a chance to come back and have his normal self restored.
right,
But it's in this horror movie situation where he can't be with the woman he loves.
right.
So that doesn't drive him crazy. It just gives him this indignant, like a mad rage. And so you're right. Frankenstein does meet his match. It's the difference between someone who is driven over the edge of ambition, but has the sense in some capacity to bring himself back from the brink. I think if Frankenstein were to go crazy and then someone did that little drill thing into the top of his head, it wouldn't restore any humanity because he doesn't have any.
Right.
So when he's throwing those fire bombs, when Brandt is throwing those fire bombs in this beautiful, it's almost like a Saw movie trap. Like, okay, the papers with the formula you want are in your study or in my study. You can go get them, but I'm holding a gun and I've got 8 Molotov cocktail lanterns. I'm just going to throw at you from every single angle. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I love, like, again, like flashing back to my 8-year-old self, that final image, again, I think this touches on things that aren't just jump scares. They're not just like, gory, like the image of somebody who is so bent on vengeance and who realizes his monstrosity. Like Dr. Brandt picks up Frankenstein at the end and walks back into the inferno. So he's committing suicide. He's committing, he's killing his rival. But like the idea of suicide to me was pretty, ethereal as a young child. And I was like, this is so what it means to not want to live anymore. Like he was like, I cannot live like this. And I'm willing to sacrifice my life to end this evil. And I was just like, I just thought it was like again, imagine, 8-year-old me just sitting there like, because that's the end of the movie. And then like you cut the commercial and it's 2:00 in the morning. And then, I'm just like alone in the world with existential dread.
What are you doing at 8 years old watching movies at 2:00 in the morning?
Hey, the second feature came on at midnight. What are you going to do?
Yeah. But no, that's the other thing. So there's a movie after this, and you said it's Cushing's last one?
Correct. Yeah. Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, which is, again, a direct sequel. It does follow the events of this one into that one.
Wow. Okay. Because I was going to say, like, I guess that makes sense. I haven't seen this movie yet. We'll be talking about that next month. But this almost seems like it should have been the evil of Frankenstein, because it is the culmination of everything, and he does some truly dark stuff in here. Like when he stabs, is it Ilsa? Is that her name? What? No. What's her name?
Let's find out.
Yeah. Oh.
Her name is
it Anna? It's Anna Spengler.
It is Anna.
Yes, I have that written down in my notes. Just my notes are all over the place. But no. So when he stabs her, on the stairs, and that drives Carl crazy, and Frankenstein barely makes it out of this house, and then Carl's there to tackle him, and then Frankenstein blinds Brandt, or he sticks a flaming piece of the parchment in his face. It doesn't quite blind him, it disorients him. Yep. He stumbles out into the lawn onto this other fight, and then kind of picks up Frankenstein, did he? I can't remember what he did. Did he like assault Carl, or did Carl just kind of roll off of him?
He punches out Carl.
Okay. Because I just like the idea of him, being so blind mad that he just thinks that Carl is Frankenstein, just like wailing on him.
See, and I had that he was being benevolent, and he was also saying, this one's mine.
Right.
You don't get to have this one. This one's mine. And I felt a genuine sense of loss when Anna gets stabbed. You're like, oh, dang, like, she has been trying so hard to be good throughout and like just navigate these horrible situations that she keeps finding herself in. And she gets stabbed for her troubles and dies on the steps.
And it's not even one of those, I like that they do this because it's a cruel end to this character. Not that I wanted anything bad to happen to her, but thematically it works for the rest of the film. Right. It's not like she gets stabbed and then Carl stumbles in and they have to have a final tender moment together. No, he just finds her dead corpse.
Yeah. I was like, man, that's what I mean. Like, I don't know what was in. Well, Burt Batt, who wrote the screenplay, he and Anthony Nelson Keys came up with the story together, but Burt Batt is credited with the screenplay. Burt Batt was an assistant director with Hammer, and he directed a lot of the movies, including some of the ones that we've seen recently. But this was his only screenwriting credit. And, I kind of like go, I wonder what else he had in the bag. I don't remember how successful this one was at the box office. It was starting, Hammer's dominance was starting to wind down. But I just think it's a terrific marriage of cast, screenplay, and direction. I just feel like it really all comes together into a really terrific, cohesive whole. It's like, and I feel like it's interesting to watch the shift in tone from, Frankenstein Created Woman, where Cushing is almost a supporting role. Here, it's very much an ensemble piece because we spend a lot of time with Branson, his wife, and the inspector, and it just feels like the movement is spread around the cast, spread around the characters. Cushing is absolutely driving the action, but he's not center stage all the time.
Right, and this is, as you kind of touched on before, in a way, a greatest hits of the other Frankenstein films. There's Easter eggs in that opening lab scene, including the body in the glass case. We've seen that before. We've seen the idea of the Frankenstein experiment working, but then deteriorating because of stuff that happens to the body. That doesn't happen in this case. The guy is fine. He seems to be sharper than ever.
Yeah.
But that's almost it's even more horrific because he's fully aware of what is going on and what's happened to his soul and what he'll never be able to have again. And yeah, I like that Frankenstein leaves the picture for a while to have these tender scenes between the Brants, and she just can't handle it. And you wonder, like, but that's your husband. But then you think about, what if this was me and my wife came back in another body and had been dead and insane for a decade? Like, can you love someone if it's just the thing speaking from behind a different pair of eyes?
Right. And I think that has been explored, I believe, in other films, but I really like how well it's, and I think Freddie Jones is just terrific. I remember seeing him for the first time in The Elephant Man as the tyrannical sideshow manager, John Merrick's manager. And then also he shows up in Dune. And
Krull, I believe. I think he's in Krull.
Definitely, he's absolutely in Krull. And then he ends up being, the father of Toby Jones, who has done his own share of genre work. So, and it's so funny to look at you. Like, when I first saw Toby Jones, I didn't really think about it. But then, like, when you realize, oh, yes, of course he's Freddie Jones's son, because he looks just like Freddie Jones. But I think Freddie Jones is terrific in this film, as are pretty much all the cast.
Agreed. Now, the one critique I would have is something that you talked about a little bit ago: the scene with the gestures when Mrs. Brandt is taken down to the lab and shown her husband, and he's all under wraps. I think earlier they had shown, when they first revived the body, they show the hand kind of twitching because Frankenstein's kind of testing it out. But when Mrs. Brandt comes down, the body is all bandaged up and there's a sheet draped over it. And this is where the 12-year-old boy in me was having a real hard time because of the camera angle. It's straight on. The body is here. Frankenstein and Mrs. Brandt are kind of like leaning over the body, and he's like, saying, kind of prompting her what to ask. And then the hand twitches, but the hand twitches under the sheet in a very unfortunate position. Like a 2 minutes later, it goes back to like kind of an over the Brandt's shoulder, so you can see them, very clearly. Oh, there's the hand, but it looks like Mr. Winky is saying hello.
And now I'll never be able to see that scene the same way again.
I'm happy to ruin people's favorite movies. That's what I do.
Well, and on a Frankenstein note, so you're familiar with Bride of Frankenstein, right?
Yes.
So there's a scene in the old blind hermit's cave where he, not his cave, but his cottage, when the monster stumbles onto the blind hermit, a scene that was parodied extremely well in Young Frankenstein. But there's a scene where the blind man like puts his head down in the monster's lap, being so grateful that he's, that God has sent him a friend at long last. And one of the John Kitley talks about this in his book, Discover the Horror. But like one of the professors who was talking about the film says, and this is showing James Whale's homosexuality, in putting it in a scene of fellatio. And you're like, wait, what? No, that's not what's happening. How dare you? But now I can never watch that movie the same way again. Thanks, scholar.
It reminds me of that scene. I think it's an Airplane or Airplane 2 where the plane or the shuttle is about to crash and they're going into positions, and stewardess says, "Everybody put your heads between your legs." And then she says, "Between your own legs, Father," to the pervy priest. Oh, good times. Yeah. Anything that we've missed? I know this is kind of a shorter episode because we're on a clock due to all fault of my own and my slow computer. Hence why this looks a little bit weird in terms of the quality on my end, I think. But yeah. So final thoughts on Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed.
Well, how do you feel in terms of like, where does this fall in the pantheon for you? I have certainly celebrated enough that people can recognize how I feel about it. I'm curious how it falls for you.
I mean, it's right there at the top. And I think it's because, like I said, when I started out, it's the culmination. It's the building of, it's like sketching. You sketch something out, you refine it a bit. And then like after a few drafts, you've got the thing that you want to put on your wall. This is definitely the thing that I want to put on my wall. I love all of these movies, some more than others, but to various degrees of what they bring to the table. And I like that they pay. This is a true homage. This is going to be like the high watermark for an homage. Usually when people talk about homage, they're talking about just ripping stuff off that you've seen before and putting it in front of you, possibly even in the same context as before without adding anything to it. Yeah. This really is like exploring themes and even the iconography. Like when you see that rubber mask that Frankenstein is using in the beginning, it's almost a callback to the Christopher Lee situation in the first movie, that kind of deformed, melting, stitchy face. And I love seeing that because I'm like, okay, that's a great reveal. I was hoping that it wasn't just going to be, oh, that's just the mask they're using for the monster. No, it's an actual fake mask. So I ripped it off. I was very relieved. But yeah, they take all of the stuff that we know and love from these other films. They dip it into this movie and say, this is why all of this was important, really. Here's where we're going beyond with this story. And for what it sounds like of this next movie, are we going to end up in hell?
We're going to get real close to hell. It does, and I do love that it does feel like a true evolution of a character. It does feel like we're watching a character slowly, continue to descend into this morass of amorality. And, by the time we see, mild spoiler, by the time we see him in Frankenstein and a Monster from Hell, like he's clearly gone. Like this is a man who has gone insane, and not in the same way as Brandt, but he's not thinking rationally anymore. And that feels like, exactly how it should be. Like this is the journey over 6 films, and this is where we end up. And he ends up in, like he's in an insane asylum, working in an insane asylum. And it's like, absolutely right. This is exactly where this series should end.
It sounds almost like Bride of Reanimator. Or is that the one where they were in the prison, or
That's Beyond Reanimator.
Beyond? Maybe I'm thinking of Beyond Reanimator. But yeah, so I'm all for it. I'll be there with you next month. I can't wait. Yeah. So I keep losing my train of thought. I need more coffee, but if I think about it, I'll mention it another time. But yeah.
But I would have been perfectly content if the series had ended here as well, because I feel like this is a true finale. It's a true ending. Not to say I don't like Monster from Hell, and I actually enjoy the ending of Monster from Hell as well. But this is kind of, as it's got my favorite beginning, middle, and end. So well done, Terrence Fisher and company.
I remember what I was going to say very quickly.
Right.
You were talking about the evolution of the character. We literally meet Frankenstein in the first movie as a young, what is he, like a teenager or just out of school.
That's right.
When he gets, his mentor, who eventually kind of becomes his apprentice. And now we're seeing him as this old man who may or may not be on his way to the afterlife. So yeah, it's everything's coming full circle. Modern Hollywood, go back and watch some of these Hammer films and and learn something, thing or two. But I'm thankful for these lessons, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. AC. We'll be cruising through Hammerland again in about a month or so. Are we doing a double feature? Are we going to go back and revisit Scars of Dracula?
I know we're tackling Taste the Blood of Dracula. I think because we're heading into 1970. You may want to revisit Scars of Dracula on your own terms, but I think there's going to be plenty to talk about with Taste the Blood of Dracula that you don't feel like you need to have Scars to pad it out. How about that?
I thought.
And Scars is kind of its own standalone feature, whereas Taste the Blood of Dracula feeds right back into Dracula's Risen from the Grave.
Okay, so we are going to be talking about two movies. I'll just watch a third movie for homework.
Wait, what's the third movie?
The Frankenstein, the Monster from Hell.
That's 71. I don't think.
Oh,
yeah.
Once again, the spreadsheet strikes. So I got to go back and clean up my notes, and I'll do that, and I'll let you go, sir.
Yeah, that's okay. I think if anything, we were going to talk about maybe Scars and Taste the Blood, but Frankenstein, the Monster from Hell is still ahead of us.
All right. Well, I'm looking. I almost want to talk about that tomorrow. Damn.
Great.
But
more to find me.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. Everybody watching, check out Aaron's stuff. It's all links in the description. I'll link to that review in case people want to read it instead of just listen to it again. Yeah, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Until next time, thank you for traveling with us through Hammerland on carriage this time, not a car.
Well done.
Yes. All right. Take care.